This lesson is for HCB, an online fashion brand. So we're pulling up the creative brief and looking at some images, looking at some competitors' images. About half of the websites I looked at were good here. Here's HCB's site. It's not very good. There's H&M's, which is very grid-like. You'll see a lot of Kate Spade images in this video. And the reason for that is, and this is a little bit of a trick you can use, sometimes there's a brand that's very familiar to the brand you're trying to establish, and you can use that as a proxy. So Kate Spade, even though it's a brand for older women, the art direction of the photos is very much what I want to capture. So that's why you'll see a lot of Kate Spade images in that inspiration folder. And that's what I'm writing down right there. Needs to be more Kate Spade-like, needs more edge, but not too much. We don't want to alienate the parents. By the way, if you read the creative brief, if you read it, it's the problem this brand is having is a lot of their younger clientele is going towards a little bit edgier websites like Nasty Gal and H&M. When in the past, they would have done that when they were 19 or 20. Now they're doing that much earlier, and it's taking away market share from them. So that's essentially the business problem. So right here, I'm writing. Also, HCB had not much of a brand presence. So what's unique about this lesson is we're kind of establishing the brand as well as designing a site. So we're keeping those two things in mind. So I'm skipping to color now. Don't really have an idea of what I want. I know that I don't want stereotypical quote-unquote girly colors, like all pinks and purples. I might use some of those colors, but I don't want it to be dominated by those colors. When I'm looking at these colors, I'm thinking what could work well for the brand as well as the site. Usually you just have to be concerned with the site in the other lessons. I think I was leaning towards split complementary themes here. I wanted to have a little bit of a punch because this is a younger brand, and there's a nice little punch you can get from split complementary colors that you can get from complementaries, but you have more to work with if there's 3 colors. My concept for this site, I don't think I wrote it down yet. Maybe I did. My concept came from, well, first of all, I have limited fashion knowledge, so I was kind of just digging around at whatever ideas I had in my head. And one thing that came to mind is women waiting, like in a doctor's office, browsing through fashion magazines. Just that act of browsing was interesting to me. They're taking everything in quickly. And that was like an editorial concept that I thought could be interesting. So I wrote that down, editorial, thought about what that meant on a website. It would mean a lot more hand-holding. It's telling these young girls what looks good. And we'll get back to that concept. Right now, for the composition, playing off of that editorial concept, I liked all these loose sites, these loose compositions. something really interesting about all these different sizes. In the same way that you're browsing that magazine and not really, like every ad is a different shape, every article is a different shape, but you're still able to take it all in. So that's what I was thinking about for the composition. I think I'm just organizing the colors here. Yeah, half the column is triads and the other half is split complementary colors. So I didn't decide on any colors yet. I'm kind of taking a break. As you'll notice, I tend to do when I'm working. If none of the colors come to you, it's okay. Just take a break, work on something else. And right now I'm starting to play with the loose layout, looking at this other sites I liked. And now I'm about to bring in some images to make it feel more real. Half of these images are product images, and the other half are lifestyle images. I wanted to have a nice balance. If you notice on the REI site, there was one of the competitors was Patagonia, and it was all brand. And they could do that because the brand was so strong. They didn't have to sell product because people were already interested in it. For this, you couldn't get away with an all brand experience because they're trying to sell merch, and they just don't have a strong enough brand presence. So they need to have product with a mix of lifestyle images on there. To clarify that a little bit more, if you think about Amazon, there's almost zero brand there. It's all products. Amazon doesn't even really talk about themselves. And the opposite of that is the Patagonia site, which is all like lifestyle imagery on the homepage. It doesn't even talk about products at all. You don't see prices. So there's every website is going to be a balance in between those two. So I'm starting to play with the composition again. I don't really know what I want yet. I know I want it to be loose, but that's all I know. So I'm just kind of playing around, seeing if anything comes to me. Half the time I'll have a good idea about what the composition will be, and half the time I won't. It really matters. It varies, rather. Now I'm playing with the idea of different sizes. This goes back to hierarchy. All those similar sized rectangles were a little boring to me. So, and the H&M site did that. I don't know why they did that, but when everything is the same size, you don't know which is more important. So mixing in some product here, putting that dress in. One thing I'm doing on this site is all of these product shots and lifestyle images, the clothes in them, from the best I can tell just by the sites I pulled them from, they are more trendy. They're more stylish than the clothes that were on HCB. And if we were to go and be in the pitch with the client, we would say, listen, we can can make your website as beautiful as we want, but if the clothes aren't changing as well, it's not going to meet your business objectives. So we should have a discussion about what you're selling in order for it to appeal to that more sophisticated girl. You can't just put lipstick on a pig. So I got a little tired of the composition. Now I'm switching to the nav. I did like that position of the girl in that peacoat green jacket. I liked the image, and I liked that we're starting with a lifestyle image. When you're reading across the page, you'll go left, right, and start at the top. So that very first image they're probably going to see is that girl. Here's their logo, which isn't very good. That green, I think I just sampled her dress, or that coat that didn't come from our color palettes. There's our concept editorial. Now I'm starting to think about what these different categories are, what the names are. And I'm just kind of making this up as I go. One or two of these things I just saw on other sites and I thought it was a good idea. So I thought trends was a good idea because this is a younger audience and they might want some more hand-holding than a typical female buyer. When I'm adjusting all these images, I first make them into smart objects, and that lets you scale them at whatever size you want. And then I'll put just a square down there, a vector square, and make a clipping path. So you're not really changing you're changing the mask of the image. You're just changing the shape below it. So you can just move a point and then the image will get bigger. It's a little bit quicker than masking each image entirely. You can start to see a little bit of structure coming into play. For example, today's promos and events, they're exactly half the size of the girl. So there's some logic starting to happen. Because I had that girl on the left so large, I wanted to have a product image pretty big as well. So that's what I'm moving right there, that scarf. Because our concept was editorial, I have a little events module there. And I was thinking it could just be like in-store events, or maybe events based on their IP that aren't even HCB related. So it's in the same way a magazine would say like a cool music show coming up or things to check out. Now, whether the client can execute on that is another problem, or not a problem. It's a task you're gonna have to deal with eventually. But when you're doing sites like this, you're gonna show it to the client. You're gonna tell them this is everything I want to do. You're not holding back. You're just showing it as polished as you can, so that they can see what your vision is. And then when you have that pitch meeting, you can say, listen, I don't know if you guys can execute on this, but I think it would be really cool if you did it. That has been an issue on projects I've been on in the past. We did a rebranding for a company once, and we defined exactly how the brand looked, photography style, colors, everything. And then we handed over this brand book to their creative team. But the creative team, they were more like production artists than creative directors. I think they're based in Ohio or somewhere. And they just weren't, they couldn't execute to the level of the brand book. And we didn't consider that beforehand. We didn't know who the creative team was. We just said, this is our vision. We want it to look like this. The client agreed, but the client's internal creative team weren't able to take the photos in that way. They just weren't. I don't think they had a sophisticated enough design eye, and they just weren't as large as we first thought. So when that happens, it's fine. You just have to readjust, and maybe there are easier things that they can accomplish, and you just try to find what those things are. Like maybe the photos aren't as art directed. Maybe they're shot on simpler backgrounds, things like that. Right now I'm trying to get a mask of this girl. I'm trying to cut out the background so we can have whatever color we want back there. You may have noticed I went into the channels to do that. That's my preferred way of extracting an image like that. And if you just look at the longer video, you can see exactly how I go about that. Basically, I try to find a channel that has the most contrast in it, and then you copy that and just erase anything outside of that. So you copy the channel, you duplicate the channel, and you load it, and then you just delete the parts you don't want. It's a little tricky. Once you do it a few times, it becomes more natural. While I was talking, I think we narrowed down the colors a little bit more. Those big swatches of colors that you saw, there were two of them, 2 sets of 3 each, and now I'm just trying colors from each of them. I was definitely leaning towards this yellow and green, and pink, was that the third color? Yeah, and then in the right side there was an orange, similar green, and a purple. So taking a break from colors again, now we're going to type. Like I usually do, I'll go to Type Kit, and I believe I'm looking for headline fonts to start. While I'm doing this, I'm keeping in mind I want something kind of friendly, not too bold. Maybe something a little more stylized. A lot of those fonts you see that are really heavily stylized, you're going to want to steer away from them because there's a time and place for some of them. But for something like this, there's so much going on that if you were to have a font that's calling a lot of attention to itself, it's going to feel out of place. So right now, we have a pretty good balance when it comes to our alignment and our typography, hierarchy, color and style, all that stuff. We want them to work together. And if your fonts are just too stylized, it's going to call attention to itself in a way that you don't want. If you have a simpler design with fewer elements, you can get more crazy with the fonts. Right now I'm just playing with, I'm seeing how the font looks like in a CTA. My mom has a thing called Girls' Night every month where she goes out with her female coworkers. I think that's where I got the idea for that Girls' Night event. Some of these modules, like the ones in the bottom left that are red and pink, I know I don't want those colors. Sometimes I'll just make them gray if I'm just trying to use it in the layout. But I definitely don't think they look good, and I'm going to address them soon. This is a cool little plugin called Subtle Patterns. And it's just a bunch of basic repeating patterns. And you just click on them and they'll show up in Photoshop. This isn't free. I feel like it was just maybe $10, but it's worth it. I use it now and then. My thinking on this was I didn't want it to be a plain color. So I'm just looking for something, just want to add a little bit of texture in there. I believe I stay with these leaves there. I liked the look of them. That top right corner is starting to come together. There's a good example of me going into the levels. I just went in there and found a channel that had a lot of contrast, and I duplicated it, and then I loaded it. And here you'll see me just delete the outside of it. One thing I was considering on this was I liked those three colors, the yellow, the pink, and the green, but they were bright. So I like this idea. I'm kind of a sucker for lots of white and then these pops of color. So that's what I had in the back of my mind here. That girl in the pea coat is a good example. It's just like a white background, and then her rain boots pop and her jacket pops. Those modules, like today's promos and the events, you'll notice it's different. It's a different size from this girl and then the ladybird necklace. I don't know if I showed it here. We probably passed it, but I had them the same size at one point, and it just felt much too modular. So it would be very clearly like one of these squares, or four of these squares equals one of these big images. And I just wanted it to be a little more loose than that. That's why this summer sale module is taller than the promos. Here I'm thinking about the concept again, editorial, and I thought it would be neat if the links are surrounding her. So it says P code next to the P code. You click on it, it'll go to that section. Feels very editorial. Now I'm thinking this module needs a title of some kind. So I'm just kind of riffing some names, trying different things. For some sites like this, I would just use lorem ipsum. But since the concept was editorial, I felt like it brought it to life much more, having specific events and discount codes here. I don't think you would. I don't think the concept would come across if you just had lorem ipsum stuff there. Going back to the nav. That's right. That blue was sort of arbitrary, so I'm changing it to our pink color. And now it fits better with the rest of the colors. That nav background color came from, I was thinking green, and then I thought it would be a good idea to have the nav be independent of everything else. So it's its own, it's kind of like a dark green there, really dark, muted green. So it exists independently of the content. I think it helps. You can see there's a clear line when your eye goes from the nav to the content modules. What I'm doing now, again, going back to the concept, this module above the handbag, I thought it would be neat to show like a pattern that's in style. It's me Googling, are polka dots trendy? I think they were, because that was a recent blog post. And here's me Googling, are stripes trendy? And the answer to that was yes, also. So this would likely link to a written piece, kind of like those blog posts you just saw, talking about why stripes or polka dots are trendy right now. I remember battling these polka dots and stripes, and I go back and forth quite a few times, and then neither of them quite fit until the end. I think I gave up again for a little while. I'm moving on to this other section. I think we might have missed it, but I believe the fonts I chose were Museo and Proxima Nova. Museo for headlines, and then I think it was Proxima Nova for CTAs. Doing lots of tweaks now, but it's mostly has come together. I've got a grid I'm happy with. I like the hierarchy between those big squares and the smaller ones. There's a variety that's nice there. I've also chosen the pink, the yellow, and the green. Some of these things I don't write down. I would suggest that you do as you're starting. Like that Evernote doc I had. Once I decided on these colors, if I were you, just write it down so you're committed to it, or have it in your Photoshop doc open. Some of those things, like proximity, there's not going to be anything to write down, but just have it in mind. Have a list of those 10 things handy so you can make sure you're covering all of them. But the other things like brand and concept and research, definitely going to want to write stuff down for those. Putting a little footer in here. More tweaks. I think those polka dots are still a little too strong, and I think I changed them one more time. Pretty sure I go back to the stripes, but we'll see. Now I'm changing the colors of the CTAs. They don't all have to be the same color. Alright, going back to the polka dots and stripes one last time. I think every project you're going to have things like this that you just kind of struggle with, things that you wouldn't expect to. That's fine, it happens. There we go. See, I preferred this because there was more white space in between the stripes, so they didn't call as much attention to themselves. Just going back and forth, whether to make the footer that dark color of the nav or just like a lighter color. I think the final version was just like that light gray. Okay, now we're saving it, and I think we're done. Just deleting all that noise. And there's our final version. Not too bad. Hope you enjoyed that. If you have any questions, check out the long version. You'll see how I do things much easier in that. Thanks.